Hello and welcome back. It's time now for African news, and coming up in today's edition, stemming the tide of interreligious bloodshed. With more French troops moving into the Central African Republic, the French president pays a visit this Friday. We take you to a camp set up by peacekeeping forces in the capital, Bangui. Back here in Paris, the Franco-Cameroonian citizen Michel Thierry Ntangana is reunited with his family after spending 17 years in a prison in Cameroon. And a new wave in Ivory Coast. More and more women are ditching the straightening irons and the chemicals and enjoying their hair in its natural form. Hello and welcome to the programme. First, the French President François Hollande has this Friday been visiting the Central African Republic for what's been his second visit to the volatile country since France launched a military operation there. Well, speaking in the capital Bangui, Hollande said that international troops are there to help to stop the country from breaking apart. Well, earlier on this week, MPs here in Paris voted to extend the French military operation to the Central African Republic.
French President François Hollande arrived in Bangui, the capital of the Central African Republic, on Friday to visit 2,000 French troops whose mission to stop deadly sectarian violence was just extended by the French National Assembly. After 3 months, the French troops, along with 6,000 soldiers from the African Union, seized over 10 tons of weapons from both sides, the mainly Muslim Seleka rebel group and the anti-Balaka militias. The French president said it shows that progress has been made.
We must stop revenge killings, re-establish the authority of the government, and allow it to resume talks, and to avoid any attempt to divide the country in the east.
After he visited the French troops, François Hollande met with the interim Central African president, Catherine Samba-Panza, who thanked him for his help. Religious leaders in the country have been trying for weeks to stop the sectarian violence, but without success.
We would like to reiterate our desire to continue to go against the flow and to say that this country is a secular country. The most important thing is to live together.
But the massacres continue throughout the country, with Muslims fleeing from the Christian militias. 250,000 Muslims have fled to neighboring countries, Chad and Cameroon, and 1 million Central Africans have been displaced within the country.
Well, France has sent more troops to the Central African Republic, and the international mission to the country is showing signs of being gradually stepped up, as France 24's Chris Moore in the capital Bangui now explains.
The momentum has been building, but as you say, it has been a relatively slow process. These 400 extra French troops are now in Bangui. We saw their convoy rolling into town yesterday. At the same time, as François Hollande pointed out when he greeted those troops at the airport today, there's another 1,000 Europeans on their way. They'll be here by the end of March, all of which, along with the African contingent, will bring the total number of overseas forces here to 9,000. That's just 1,000 short of what the United Nations has deemed necessary. As you say, François Hollande has got his vote through Parliament. He still faces a fairly sceptical French public in terms of this mission, and he was keen to point out as he greeted those troops at the airport today how valuable he thinks the work they've done here has been in terms of effectively avoiding an even more serious bloodbath after their deployment on December the 5th.
France 24's Chris Moore reporting that from Bangui. In other news on the continent, in a rare move for an institution that rarely wades into politics, the World Bank announced that it's frozen $90 billion of aid to Uganda. That's following the signing of a new law which toughens punishments for gay people. Well, several countries have already decided to pull the plug on aid to Uganda in protest, and Washington says it's currently reviewing its ties with the East African state.
Cut off and criticised, but not concerned. The Ugandan government has shrugged off the latest cuts to its foreign aid, claiming Africa should stand up to Western domination. Their spokesperson said, "The West can keep their aid to Uganda over homos. We will still develop without it." Denmark, the Netherlands and Norway have already either frozen or altered their aid programs to the East African country after President Museveni signed off one of the world's harshest anti-gay laws, despite massive international pressure not to put pen to paper.
We are seeing new laws like the anti-homosexuality bill enacted by Uganda and signed into law by President Museveni earlier this week, which not only makes criminals of people for who they are, but punishes those who defend the human rights that are our universal birthright.
The new law, which states that repeat homosexuals should be jailed for life, is widely popular in Uganda, but not at the World Bank. It has now stalled its $90 billion loan that was set up to help Uganda improve its health system. We have postponed the project for further review to ensure that the development objectives would not be adversely affected by the enactment of this new law. The bank still has a portfolio of projects worth $1.5 billion in Uganda, a country it classifies as one of the world's poorest. Western outrage at the law has already triggered a dramatic fall in the Ugandan shilling this week.
In other news, a new lease of life. A French man kept in solitary confinement in Cameroon for 17 years has today arrived back in Paris. 49-year-old Michel Thierry Atangana was arrested back in 1997 after being accused of embezzling public funds. Well, he's described his ordeal as unimaginable. He was held in an isolation cell that wasn't even big enough for him to stand up in.
After 17 years apart, when Michel Thierry Atangana was arrested in 1997, his son Eric was only 5. Free and now back in Paris, the businessman described his long ordeal.
I did not spend 17 years in prison, but 17 years in a cell. I just want to say thank you this morning. Thank you, France. Thank you, my country.
Atangana's other country is Cameroon. It's the Cameroonian president, Paul Biya, who put him in charge of a series of highway construction projects in the 1990s. But Atangana was a close ally of Minister Titus Edzoa. When the then powerful Edzoa said he'd run for president, both men were arrested. A court convicted Atangana on charges of embezzlement, a decision his supporters saw as a political maneuver. On February 18, President Paul Biya signed a decree freeing prisoners serving time for embezzlement. Michel Thierry Atangana is freed, but his troubles are not over yet. Cameroon authorities say he still has a huge debt to pay.
It's a decree that reduces jail time, but the other sentences still hold. Mr. Atangana has to pay what the law requires him to pay. He's free to come back to Cameroon, of course. The only uncertainty is what Cameroonian courts will decide, given that he hasn't reimbursed the state.
For now, Michel Thierry Atangana is busy catching up with his family and stopping at the hospital for a checkup after a long confinement.
Now to the far north of the African continent, and some 300 people launched a dawn assault in a bid to cross into the Spanish enclave of Melilla, which lies on the northern tip of Morocco. Well, most of them made it across the wall, which separates the enclave from the neighbouring territory, but dozens of the mostly sub-Saharan African migrants were injured during the process. And to Ivory Coast now, where an increasing number of women have decided to stop using flat irons and chemicals to straighten their hair. The latest trend in the country is to let hair grow naturally. Well, in this next report, we find out about this group of women in the capital, Abidjan, for whom it's all been their idea.
Au Natural is making a comeback in Ivory Coast thanks to these women. They're against relaxing perming and straightening their hair, and are pushing others to rebel and embrace their locks.
Society imposes these standards. A modern woman is portrayed with long or short straight hair, but never with nappy hair. There's an identity issue.
Their association is called Nappies for Bobby. Nappy stands for natural and happy, while Bobby is how locals refer to their city, Abidjan. Many women here straighten their hair, and even sometimes bleach their skin in pursuit of their perception of ideal beauty. But Abidjan's Nappy movement is determined to put an end to this trend.
When people see natural hair here, they look at you like you're an outcast, as if there was something wrong with your hair. It should be normal to have natural hair.
2,400 members have already joined the Nappies for Bobby group on Facebook. And the movement is also attracting men, like Ange Dadi.
Everybody used to tell me that only girls could have long hair, that it's not normal for men to wear long hair. But I've always had a strong personality, and I don't care what other people think.
Every day, more and more women in Ivory Coast and around the world are undergoing what is now known in popular culture as the big cut. Some go natural because upkeep is easier and cheaper. Others do so as a statement of identity.
Well, on that note, we leave you for this edition of Africa News. Thanks for watching. The news with Cyril Vanier is up right after this.